We are now streaming. And I went with a bookmark in case anyone was curious. All right, Michelle, stand up. That's not a command. Michelle, stand up. You can stay seated.
Oh, don't worry, I will. I feel no compulsion to obey that command. Trying to think. Some interesting wrinkles in the testing framework that we have to like work out some like both regex, which Bryce took a look at, we kind of thought about together for a bit, so it needs some more thought. Someone has time. I'd appreciate, maybe I'll try and catch a Bryce another time. And then there is another is a problem because you don't just set it once, set it multiple times. So we're going to have to handle that separately. So whether or not the 209A test for the 209A helps Quentin develop AL document, it will certainly help us develop the testing framework, which is why it's good to continue to expand what we're testing with it. Yeah. So it was a good opportunity. I have to think about what other kinds of, if people have suggestions of what other type of there is another variables there are that get set multiple times, that would be helpful because I think each of those cases will have to be handled like uniquely, possibly.
Are they,
depending on what it is.
So there is another, I think a lot of times you use them with objects, right? Not just one and the object has multiple variables. Is that am I missing that?
With an array. So when you're going through a list of cases, right? You say, or last names or whatever, is there another?
Right.
And so, but the thing is the list is names. So names dot there is another. That exact variable gets answered multiple times, and sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. But in the table, you can only put a variable once, and it is not supposed to be dependent on what order the questions come in. Yeah. So instead we have to detect the index numbers, the variables that have index numbers, and prepare there is another interaction for them in case they get asked multiple times. So it's just fun. So if there are other variables, yeah. I mean, it's workable. I mean, people can write it so that they break out the table into multiple parts. So the test could be run as it currently is, but it's not useful because then everything is order dependent again, which the table is supposed to avoid. So I suppose it doesn't break the testing framework. It just, I don't know. I think it in effect breaks it because I don't think it's useful.
Is that only a problem when you don't have a preset index, or is that true the other way around? It's like, how many children do you have?
The question is only
works, but there is another is when you have an undefined number to begin with.
It only matters when the variable is there another, the attribute is there another is requested, right? So if that question doesn't come up, then it's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So Quentin, can you think of any other?
I can't think of any. I think that's the one loop that is in every interview, basically. I think in other examples that we've created, we're not using any behavior like that.
Well, just there's something else in DocAssembly, but yeah.
There's nothing
Quentin, you're talking about there is another, right? Just there is. Okay, right.
Yeah. There's no other built-in loops I can think of. I try to remember if there was another synthetic loop I made for some reason. I don't think it depended on changing the definition of a variable multiple times.
Would that be true for for loops as well?
Well, that's just for display. So it
Oh,
shouldn't be
right.
an issue.
Yeah.
And it's, if you're looping over a variable some other way, it's a unique thing you're setting each time.
Hmm.
So it should be good. It's
Okay.
just list collecting when you don't know the number of items in front. That's the only circumstance I can think
I
of right
see.
now.
So one screen list collect, which still should be, should be fine.
Mhm.
I don't know how
Right.
we'd handle one screen list collect. I'll have to think about that.
So we're
Um,
getting rid of almost
plus.
all of those,
all of the list collects.
almost all of them.
Oh,
because
yay! I
I
hate
know,
them.
Caroline, you hated them. So I was like, this is causing a problem. We can try to figure it out, or we can get rid of it. And since I know you didn't like them to begin with, we'll take them out.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
How do we handle review screens?
So
'Cause
review
there's
screens
definitely-
aren't being tested right now.
Okay, that's fair. Well, no, mostly for like getting rid of those list collect stuffs, because I definitely, in the review screen, auto generate stuff. It makes a table, and that table has a plus and a
Oh,
minus, which I guess is slightly different, because I think I don't remember exactly what would happen, but it would function very similarly to a single screen list collect.
That is true.
okay. Wow.
Actually, that is
Alright.
worth testing because sometimes it unsets the value of things in a weird way. I think that might be a DocAssembly bug, but
We should
Is there
definitely test
anything-
everything else before the review, but yes, yeah.
yeah. I think like a static analysis type of test might be good for us to think about. I was that question on Slack about someone who's like show ifs. It's like, well, we should be able to figure out show if bugs without having to run the interview for real. It should be something you could do just by looking at the questions and the template file to figure out when those bugs might crop up. It might be really useful. Anyway,
I mean,
separate
if we can
tangent.
do that, we could implement it into DocAssembly itself, and DocAssembly could tell you where your show ifs are looping. That would be really useful for everyone.
Yeah, some sort of static stuff would be very nice, honestly.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Came from
Well,
our
if there aren't
conversation
other
last week
variables
about
that are set that way, then
verifiability.
that should be
This is
fine.
this is the kind of verifiability we could figure out, I think.
Yeah. If you're right, I'd be interested in seeing some like pseudo code of it, but you don't have to do that. I just would be curious. So I'm trying to think of other things. Made a couple PRs, working on stuff. And I'm getting my second vaccine around the 15th. So just
Did you have a
FYI.
reaction to the first one?
it was basically the reaction I have to the flu shot, which is I just had to keep my arm in a sling for a few days and then it was
So just
fine.
sore arm, but not the rest of everything.
No,
That's
not to
good.
the first one at all. Yeah. I'm hoping nothing for the second one, but just prepare.
Yeah.
All right.
The 15th is a Saturday.
No, then maybe it
That
was
is
a
true.
different day. Maybe it was the 16th.
That would be a Sunday.
But it hits you
Oh, I
out.
mean,
It hits you a day
maybe it was
later.
the 14th. Listen, the appointment worked. I don't know what to tell you. It's somewhere, it's written. Maybe I can call CBS. So I don't know, but like it's around that.
Michelle will be out from the 14th through the 17th.
Exactly. Exactly.
Probabilistically.
Exactly.
All right.
Okay.
I
Caroline.
don't know what has happened since Tuesday. I've worked 11-hour days and they're just gone. I get up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I work out and the next thing I know, it's like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I don't know. It's just, I know I've done these little things, but it's just been really long days and the time's flown by. And one day, I think it was yesterday, the night before. I know this is casual Friday, but I am wasted. Not chemically, just. But yesterday, Wednesday night, my husband points to the window pane. He goes, this is really loose. I think we should do something about it. And I said, all the, not the grout, the glazing's all fallen out, but it's got metal pins holding it in. No problem. Yesterday was really windy. I'm sitting here in a meeting, and I know nobody threw a brick at our window, but that's what it felt like. And the whole pane fell out and is in pieces on the front yard.
At least it fell out, right? It could have fallen in.
Fell out, not in, out. But that's what the last 3 days have felt like. It's just like one thing after another, but I don't know. So I've been thinking about it, but I haven't actually managed to sit down and get to the 209A, but I know what needs to be done, and I don't anticipate any more complicated bugs like that last one we worked on Tuesday. But who knows? You got a question?
The shadow knows.
The shadow knows. Well, let's hope
Crossing my
somebody knows.
fingers. Crossing my fingers. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Cross fingers.
All right. Well then, Quentin.
So, good update, I think, is we did a lot of triage, but not all of it for our sprint. So next week, I think we're going to start a 2-week sprint to try to implement some features. We went through just a bunch of issues that we triaged for the runtime part of our project, not the Weaver, but for the runtime stuff. I think it feels like the right balance, since our last 2 sprints were mostly focused on the Weaver, but we haven't finished triaging the Weaver, so we might end up adding more stuff and changing that balance. We'll see. If people have ideas, not too late to tell us what your ideas are for priorities. I've been working on the 209A migration to AL document and finding lots of things that should be in our AL document class, especially the addendum stuff that aren't there yet, or that I have to figure out how to make our old addenda stuff work with it. So that's good. But I'm almost done with it. I think it's going to be mostly just fine. I'm like, I can actually tell you how many, not that anyone cares, the exact number of things I have left, but I have almost all of it.
42.
42 out of 50 something. You're looking at it?
No,
that's
I just always
always
answer
the user.
42.
Okay.
The number is always 42.
Right, sorry. So distracted. Didn't get that. Also, I'm 28 out of 38. So not 42 this time. But I realize when I'm testing addenda code, I need a real text to test it, not lorem ipsum. So I have started using, but coincidentally, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as my real text. So.
Well, now that previous exchange is just so much funnier.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just to make sure the cutoff isn't cutting off the middle of the sentence.
Right.
Shouldn't be.
Did you guys, Bryce updated the server? Did you update all the servers after Jonathan's sort of panicked message?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I
Yes,
saw you
all
had
of
already
ours.
done yours, Caroline, so I didn't update them.
Yeah, there's an issue on ours, but I don't think we have to talk about assembly line.
I might know that issue because the very first, like, Jonathan essentially like late on, was that Wednesday night that he did that?
Was it
Like
or Tuesday? It was anyway. It was late
Tuesday?
one night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the late night push that he originally had, like, had a bug in it. Essentially, like, he made a lot of deprecated warnings into errors, and there were a handful of deprecated warnings in like any sort of markdown. So essentially, if you ran an interview with your server on that particular like late night patch and not the patch that he did the next morning, then there would be an error on your server, and you can't get to anything, like even like you can't even log out, but in like visiting the server from a private window like also airs out. And so I had to like just stop and start the machine again to be able to update it. I don't know if that's what you're running into, but
No, I think
Okay.
What happens when we update our server is it didn't seem to happen this time, so I think it's a different issue, but we lose things from our config file for some reason. I'm not quite sure
Oh.
why. And the last time we upgraded the production server, something happened with one of the SSI packages. And so what I really wanted to do was just get it upgraded quickly and then go back and see what needs to be fixed. And there's some problems with the guide me, and I don't know what they are, but I don't want to take up assembly line stand-up time to talk about it. But And then I have a couple other questions, Quentin, for you, because
Okay.
we're using Stuffix API for maps. And I think that is, our Google Analytics broke when that happened. So I'm not sure whether,
Okay.
I don't know what's going on there. So I just.
Yeah,
Maybe
you
the
probably
config
have your own
file.
API key, and I think I just want to get something running.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I
wait.
figured. Yeah,
but yeah, you should use your own. That'll probably solve that, I hope.
yeah.
Oh, well, I posted a question in which you answered, Caroline.
Oh, yeah, about the dependent
addendum for
information.
dependent information.
Yeah.
So even if someone has like 30 guns, we don't want to give the police the full list of guns.
I don't think, I mean, you might want to check with Kate, but she was pretty clear about the fact that you want to give police one sheet. If you give them more, and
Okay.
obviously the photo, but if you give them more, there's a good chance they'll lose it. And I think
Okay.
if they have 30 guns, they have a lot of guns. And that's the important thing, right? So,
Right.
you know this person's armed. And I think that's the issue, not every single exact gun.
Which I guess is part of why they made it so small on the form. too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gun A, gun B, etc.
Yeah, she was pretty clear about, I think, just the one pager for defendant information. So,
Well, when we get to that point, we should just test it and make sure we're happy with how it looks if someone does have a lot. Because I'm not doing anything fancy. If they have too much information, it just won't fit on the form. But we can change what we do there.
I think the field is limited on the interview, right? Because I went
No,
through
because
and
there is an
limited-
addendum for page 1. So it's not limited and it's coming from the same information.
Oh, it's from page 1.
Well, we could
I
just
thought it was
put
a
a limit
so
on-
page. Say that, Michelle.
we could just limit it artificially and just make that field specifically limited.
So you answer it. You answer it in the defendant information questions, but it also populates page 1, right?
And for page 1, it does get an addendum.
I think that's going to be confusing for users if that field fits into an addendum, because if it's an addendum to page 1, the court doesn't care about all the guns the the defendant has. The people who care about the guns are the police, right? Because they want to be safe and they want to find them. So I don't think, and then as a user, if you get an addendum to page 1 and it's all about guns the defendant has, you might think that should go with the defendant information form, which could be confusing. So I guess the thing is, I hadn't thought about it in terms of an addendum to page 1. I'd maybe check again with Kate on that one.
We might want to take off the addendum for page 1.
Yeah, I don't think you want that particular field to run into an addendum on page 1.
It's a weird field because I think it says like we have to
Oh,
fit
yeah.
a bunch of information to the one line.
Yeah, there's no room.
It's
at
not
all.
like a separate field for whether they have a firearms ID card or
Yeah,
a gun. It's like all in one line. So
Mhm.
depending on how many things they have more or less room to describe the specifics
Right.
of the thing they have.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, since one of the edits that I was going to do is to add an I don't know box on the defendant information form, because and I feel okay about that, because Kate was saying on the financial statement, the whole form needs to be able to have people write stuff in and out around the margins and things like that. And that's what people would do if they had a paper form. If they don't, and there's plenty of people who have no idea if the defendant has weapons, has a history of violence with the police, they just don't know. And that's a place that people are going to stop, because they don't want to say yes and they don't want to say no and they don't know how to answer it. So we could either just leave it blank, or we could just put an extra checkbox on the PDF that says I don't know, that's what I think we should do.
So adding a box, I think that's a good idea too. Yeah, I don't think that the I don't know boxes all are working right. I know they did before because we definitely tested them, but I was looking at it and when I ran the tests.
I gotta go. I'll be right back. I gotta go.
No problem.
Sorry.
And I got to sign off right at 1. So I won't be able to do Casual Tuesday Friday either, by the way. But So I'll shut up now.
I did have a question before you disappear then. The issue with the probate court that wasn't showing up, is there now a contact information for that?
No, I think we still need to add that. So
Okay, we should throw that in the workflow, because I got a follow-up on that one again. So
Okay.
I just directed the individual to contact the court directly. But if we're gonna have a it's gonna throw an error, it'd be better either have a failover state, or if we I didn't know if it was that the contact information didn't exist so we couldn't include it, or if we just missed include it.
yeah, there's no email address for those courts because they added a new court. I'm not sure if they ever gave it an email actually, but we should check. Middlesex probate used to be one court. Now there's Middlesex.
And that's South. And, yeah.
I don't know if they share an email or if they have new emails. I just don't know.
Yeah, I do. Let me actually, since we're all here, let me just look what I did find something when I directed them. I was directing them mostly to do phone call.
I'll give you the issue. I just created it, so then you can add the details
Okay.
there.
Great.
And actually, if you want, you could edit the court emails list too, if it's easy for you to do.
Yeah.
Just have to add the right name. Oh, do we even have that in that file? Where's that coming from?
No, that's the question.
Oh, right. I put on the wrong repo. Mass access, not assembly line, or MA, or AL Massachusetts rather.
Yeah, it seems like there actually is just a generic Middlesex probate email.
So it's still just one email.
Yeah,
So we just have to add in with the right name of the court.
duplicates of the email with the right
This
name.
YAML file, yeah, can be in there twice. If you're able to add that, that would be great, actually.
Yeah, I can add that there and then commit it to master, and then what do we have to do to update that?
Just install that package on the production server with the update.
Can I just, could that package shall already be installed? I just hit update, right?
Yep. So just make sure the name's exactly right. I think it's just a hyphen and then south and north. So it shouldn't be too hard to see the pattern.
Yeah, that's the pattern for the other ones. It's a space between the hyphen, but yeah.
Yep.
All right, put it on my list.
All right, thanks.
Um,
All right.
No, thank you.
Yeah, I was kind of wiped out yesterday. So
Yeah,
I don't know what shot you're getting, Michelle, but Moderna knocked me out for day 2. But it was not too bad, other than just being tired.
Well, I'm glad it's so short-lived. Pretty excited about that. So
Yeah, my arm's still
right.
sore, but not even that bad. That was the only thing that lasted. All right.
Bryce, oh, bye, Quentin.
bye, Quentin.
Bryce, you got anything?
Yeah. So I did a little bit of stuff in our sprint. There's like a little Python package you can install and run bump version, and it will automatically bump everything that you need. And going to try and integrate that with like Teams and Pi and stuff like that to make it easier to actually release. And this was all sort of inspired because Matt Newstead had mentioned in the Teams conversation of like, oh, like how do we know when it's best to update? And we had no way of actually showing what we needed to update. So
you'll be happy to know, Bryce, that was on the consultant's feedback about next steps was having some means for that, to be clear.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
Cool. I was gonna say, I think David, you weren't there on Tuesday for like the admin meeting, but I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about was just going through that list in more detail, because last week you had mentioned that it was like generally we need more documentation, but I'd like to hear any like specific things that suggestions that they have.
Yeah, I can bring the final doc to I can share it in the admin, and we can talk about it at the
That'd be great.
management meeting.
Cool. Maybe doing this. Yeah, so I did a little bit of that. And then did a lot of searching and reading through Tyler docs and stuff. And I'm a little worried, a little is an understatement. Worried about the certification process, because sort of going through the certification stuff, they very like it's parts of it are worded vaguely, like it just says this needs to be publicly accessible on the web. And then other parts are very specifically like they had in mind that this operates like as a web page. There's one web page per each of like the API calls that they have, and that you handle each of these things specifically. There are parts of the like, there are things that say like action, like create a user, start making a filing, and like enter some codes, and it says verify that like all of these codes are like without like says like verify that all these codes are adhered to, and then it says like on the like on like the price check page, like before submission, make sure that the price is correct. And so like they clearly had this model of like everyone's going to be making web pages, and there's going specifically there's going to be a single web page for each of these API calls that we're making you do. And so I'm realizing that like at first I was like, well, it's essentially I'm just not sure. I have a question out on Tyler that's on the Tyler's case management tickets thing. That's like, okay, how does like just tell me how does certification work more specifically? Like, can we do something like one, like can we do something like what we're thinking of? Hey, here's an interview. Like you go like would we make them go through the interview, and we'd say, oh, if you go through the interview, like these things should change, and it will cover all of these cases. To like cover all the cases, like you go through these 3 interviews or something, and you can go and but I don't know if one that I'll actually cover everything, and then so it's essentially that like that's the first question. Second question is like, do they need a web page specifically to do everything that like a Tyler person needs to access? That's like one web page for all these API calls. And then if they do need that, can we actually handle or like so if they do that, like are we allowed to do other things that aren't in the certification? Can we like build features on top of this backend that's not like certifiable in the way that they're thinking of things being certifiable?
That last one should be I think should be an easy yes, like the idea of being able to build additional stuff around whatever tools you have. I don't think they should have a say over.
I hope so, but it's just weird that specifically it seems counterintuitive to what they're trying to certify. If they're saying like the certification, like the site has to be accessible to the public, but like, and we certify it, and at the time it's accessible to the public, but then we get rid of that because that was never our intention anyway, and we have like this additional front end that isn't going through the certification process. So like,
yeah, I don't know. We can play semantic arguments with them back and forth. As long we can make arguments that individual screens are individual web pages. We can.
But the thing is our screens aren't operating like their web.
No.
It's not necessarily like we have screens. Our screens are like web pages. It's more of they want a web page to create a user, and they want a web page to update that user and remove that user, or at least something you can granularly do all of those things. And we aren't.
Worst case scenario is we write interviews, standalone interviews for each of those features, under the assumption that they want, the question is why they want it, right? My suspicion is they want it because they want a place they can go and check and see when I put this in, does this come out?
Yes, yeah, I agree.
And so we can easily stand something up such that there is a place for each of those. But the back end on the plumbing, we might have alternate ways to fill that information in instead of from discrete interviews from a normal interview, and some of the stuff may in those cases be able to be hard coded in. So I am curious to see what they say back to your request, to your questioning, but I would for you right now, from like a technical standpoint, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would worry about getting it so that we can we can push the data, and then we can work with them to figure out what hoops we need to jump through, or how we need to talk about things for them to deal with it. Because I would tend to think about it, even though they've mentioned it as they want specific web pages to do this, I would tend to think of them as features.
Yeah.
And the argument I will make to them is that if we can hit all of your features, that should do for the certification. If you need individual pages in order to verify things, then we can stand up individual instances for those verifications. But that would be and yeah, I mean, it's a bigger question, more about them and what they want to do with their certification than it is a technical matter. There might be a technical component in that they are asking for individual pages because they want to be able to easily check.
Okay.
But let me know what they say from your response, and then what I'll do is I'll escalate things with our contacts there. If there's any continued ambiguity, or it looks like it's pointing in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I feel like I sort of like agree. I think we had been thinking along the same route of like we'll stand something up quickly, but it was mostly I was sort of realizing that like, oh, whatever we stand up is not going to be continued, like we're not going to keep it publicly accessible really. Like admins can use it, but it's not going to be the publicly accessible thing. And then on top of that, we're doing other stuff on top. And so those were just like two unanswered questions that I thought seemed relatively big if we like assume that they're okay with that. And it turns out that like, oh, you're making something else that's like not going through the same workflow. That's not certified. You can't do that. So I just, seems like a good question to ask. And I'll definitely let.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a good question to ask, and update me with what they got. But it's not something you need to worry about, aside from it was entirely appropriate to like bring it up and we should have this conversation. But you don't need to worry about fixing it. You just find out what they say, and then whatever they say, if it's not happy stuff, then push it to me and I'll handle it.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I do, at least depending on their answer, need to worry about at least having sort of just like unit testable. Yes. Essentially like directly exposing all of these APIs on our little like proxy servers, since we're like separated out of them. So I'll just have to make sure that like originally I was thinking it would be nice to have the proxy server only do a few things. It makes it a lot easier to integrate with A to J docs. So we don't have to like write a separate whole like client side on everything to do all these different workflows. That's beside the point.
My suspicion is what would likely happen is that they will that there may need to be recertifications anytime there are sort of entirely different use cases coming in. So like if some other agency was going to say, we're going to start sending A to J docs through this, then that might be a different certification. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be more business decisions on their end than technical ones. I mean, there is this sort of there's the technical side of like, why are they asking for it in this discrete manner? And I suspect it's so they can easily do testing. Although they actually probably, the truth is, they probably just never thought about anything beyond this, because these were all put together back when the system was started. And, it looks like it was spec'd out, in the 90s or something, so like no one was thinking about, oh, well, it's just a one-page app. It wasn't something people were thinking about. So just get the answers, escalate anything to me. Well, share the answers with me in either way, but if there's a need to escalate, I'll do that, and you can continue focusing on just getting the functionality.
Okay, that sounds good. And then I had two, which I think maybe these are like, it's like David and I talked a bit about service and various things. I'm never sure if I'm unclear on the legal things or if I'm unclear on the Tyler side of things. For service, does the court ever usually, like, whose responsibility is it to serve the opposing party? Is it always the party that's doing something, or do things go through the court after some point? Or like, how does it normally happen without electronics?
This is really a better question for a civil attorney. But usually my understanding is that's the party who's the moving party, right? So if you're asking the court to do something, you also are telling the other side.
Okay.
Now you might, occasionally there's like quasi court adjacent stuff that might get involved. Like you might ask for a deputy to serve someone something, or get a process server, and you might find them through the, like, but it's your responsibility as the one who's filing something with the court to let the other side know that you're filing something with the court.
Okay.
But you might somehow involve the court in that. I don't know what they do in this electronic world. My suspicion is that if you're filing it electronically with the court and the other party is a member of the same system, that then the system can alert them. But that's just a suspicion.
Yeah, no, from what I've like looked into, it's you can add service contacts, but they're only for like tied to firms specifically, which are also like where attorneys are tied to. I think most of that is just not going to be relevant to us if we're dealing mostly with self-represented litigants. But okay, that makes sense.
My suspicion is that there has to be some way where you can say, I'm going to serve this person by mail because you don't know whether or not they're in the system.
Okay.
And so there at least is there's got to be an option for. I mean, that's what we were talking about yesterday. So.
Yeah. Okay. That's right. And that was all I really had. Sorry, took a little longer.
Oh no, it's fine. Caroline, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Any insights on service? Hope you're muted.
There we go. I was clicking and clicking. It wasn't unmuting. It wasn't waiting long enough. I mean, I just think service is really complicated. I mean, that's what we've had an issue with all the way through. And then I guess it depends between Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Sometimes the court will serve for you, but it varies from whether you're in small claims court or family court or whatever. So I think I don't think you can, but that's a Tyler system, but New Hampshire uses Tyler. So I think you really need a conversation. And we've tried to have conversations with the court all along about what we should do about service. And we never really get
Massachusetts court.
Yeah, Massachusetts court. We never get a satisfactory answer, and it's not usually consistent either. So our solution is to get in touch with the court or the clerk at the court and ask them for your particular case how to serve. And I think that's the safest way, because until they come up with some sort of policy, I don't.
Right. Although here he's talking explicitly about Tyler jurisdictions where they already have the e-filing, so there is some type of policy. So we've just got to figure out. No, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
So we just got to find that. So this is a good question for Matt on Monday, because he's in that jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cool. Yeah, and then my only other thing was that Aubrey's going to start with us on the, can't remember, I think it's the 25th, because the 24th is a holiday, I think. Or is that, no, it's the 31st is a holiday. So maybe the 24th or 25th, that sort of week before June, she's going to start with us. And hopefully we'll be able to use that time to have her help us stand up the structure we want for the boot camp, which is tentatively scheduled for that first week of June. And so I'm really excited about that, because I think very highly of Aubrey, and she has a lot of experience with the group. And so I think being able to translate that in with her new role will be, I'm excited to see that. So that's that. All right.